Good afternoon. This is news in English from the Syrian Arab television in Damascus. President Bashar al-Assad has said that the biggest challenge in the region is extremism. In an interview with the German Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, President al-Assad warned that messing around with borders in this region means the demarcation of the map of very remote places as well.
President al-Assad has affirmed that there is no doubt that the terrorists will be totally eliminated in Syria. He emphasized that foreign sides are seeking politically and militarily to prolong the crisis. In reply to a question about the way to overcome the big devastation caused by the terrorists in Syria, President al-Assad said the reconstruction of the mind, the ideology, concepts. We will overcome the devastation as long as there are a dynamic people who will build what has been destroyed, the president stressed. On the future of the region, President al-Assad said after ruling out the destructive scenario of partition, there is the scenario that depends on two challenges. The first is re-establishing security and stability, and the second is reconstruction. But the biggest challenge is to stand in the face of extremism because it leads to terrorism, the president pointed out. What is happening in Iraq and Lebanon, the president went on, is the repercussions of what is happening in Syria. On the terrorism facing Syria, President al-Assad said Jabhat al-Nusra is one branch of al-Qaeda, and when there is terrorism, there is chaos, which means poverty, and which also means for Europe the loss of an important market and the advent of terrorism directly to it. President al-Assad said Syria has stretched its hand since the first day to those who want to have dialogue and is open to any anti-terrorism and unarmed opposition that has a political program. The president expressed hope that the Geneva conference would be an important occasion to push dialogue forward, wishing that this conference would succeed in preventing the smuggling of weapons and terrorists to Syria.
Iran has reiterated its stance in support of any initiative to solve the crisis in Syria politically, particularly the Russian efforts in this respect. Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Araqchi said Iran will continue its consultations and efforts with all states in order to reach a peaceful solution to the crisis in Syria. Araqchi said his country supports the convention of an international conference in Geneva on Syria, hoping this conference would be held on time in the presence of influential states, stressing that Iran will participate in such conference if it is officially invited. Araqchi said the Syrian opposition is facing many problems because it has not yet chosen its representatives to the conference. Araqchi dismissed as untrue reports about Iranian soldiers in Syria, adding that the Syrian government and army do not need such assistance and they are capable of confronting and defeating the armed terrorist groups alone. Araqchi said his country did not expect Egyptian President Mohamed Morsi's step in severing Egypt's relations with Syria, adding that Egypt's presence in regional issues should be constructive through political dialogue. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has said that the calls to impose a no-fly zone and humanitarian corridors in Syria do not help the Convention of Geneva II conference. In an interview with the Kuwaiti news agency Kona, Lavrov said, endorsing documents that hold the Syrian authorities fully and exclusively responsible for what's happening in the country, declaring the intention of arming the Syrian opposition and calling for a no-fly zone and humanitarian corridors does not help the preparations for the conference. The Russian foreign minister said, those who do not this must realize that such steps are in line with terrorist actions on the ground, as those terrorists from al-Qaeda and other extremist organizations are trying to obstruct the convention of the conference and the efforts aimed at establishing peace in Syria, and they are carrying out deadly sectarian acts such as the massacre of Hatlas village in Deir ez-Zor. President Barack Obama has said any American military intervention in Syria, such as establishing a no-fly zone, does not solve the problem and that his country will not be involved in another war in the Middle East. In an interview with the American PBS, Obama said, in light of the complications of the situation in the Middle East, we should not hasten to go into any additional wars. He warned against big dangers that accompany any direct military intervention in Syria. On the calls to establish what is called humanitarian corridors, Obama said such a step would require air raids the repercussions of which cannot be limited, thus causing further casualties among civilians. Obama alleged that he warned against supplying the armed terrorist groups with sophisticated weapons. Russian President Vladimir Putin, on his part, declared following his meeting with Obama in Belfast on the sidelines of the Group of 8 summit that both presidents had agreed to pressure all sides in Syria to sit at the table of negotiations during the international conference to be held in Geneva, referring at the same time to differences in viewpoints regarding the Syrian crisis. A poll published by the American CNN showed that 54% of Americans oppose Obama's decision to provide the terrorist groups in Syria with weapons. The poll showed that the opposition to Obama's plan was stronger among the Republicans, as 63% said no and 42% of Democrats also opposed the decision. The U.S. has reasserted its involvement in supporting the armed terrorist groups in Syria by overtly announcing its plans to provide them with military aid. Syria's representative at the UN said that the whole world has witnessed a series of disgusting crimes committed by the Takfiri terrorist groups against children in Syria, including killing, slaughtering and deforming. During a UN Security Council session on the use of children in armed conflicts, Al-Jaafari added that through the UN reports, the international community took 2 years to realize that the Takfiri groups have recruited children in their ranks. Al-Jaafari explained that the Takfiri groups, supported by the petrodollar systems, have targeted the education and health sectors and forced citizens to evacuate. While the government tended to open a number of schools as sheltering centers, Al-Jaafari also emphasized that the Syrian government is committed to protect citizens, especially children. Syria's permanent representative at the UN called for lifting the economic sanctions against Syria and the Syrian people, which primarily affect the children. Terrorists today detonated an explosive charge attached to the car of Deputy Dean of the Faculty of Literature at Damascus University, Dr. Siham Dannoun, in Al-Zahira Al-Jadida neighborhood in Damascus. Seriously injuring her, the terrorist blew up the device while she was getting into her car near Al-Rida Mosque. Her legs were amputated. Syrian army's units continue their operations against terrorists in Idlib and its suburbs, destroying their hideouts and their mortar cannons and killing and injuring a large number of them. Several terrorists were killed in Tahtanaz, Binnish, Sarje, Ram Hamdan, Hzano, Sheikh Bahr, Tal Minnis al-Hamidiyya and Jirin in Idlib suburbs. Machine guns were destroyed in Al-Jabal al-Arba'in. The army units also killed and wounded terrorists belonging to Jabhat al-Nusra, also in Idlib suburbs. Another unit clashed with a terrorist group that committed acts of killing and looting near Al-Janudiyya crosspoint in Jisr al-Shughur suburbs. In Daraa countryside, our army units defused a number of landmines and explosive devices planted by terrorists in Kafr Shamsin on Deir al-Adas and Samlin Jasim access road. In related context and in Homs countryside, Syrian Arab Army foiled an attempt by an armed terrorist group to infiltrate from Lebanon into Syria from Tel Kalach, inflicting heavy casualties among them. Syrian Arab Army also targeted a number of terrorist gatherings in Tel Daw, Tel Dahab and Kifr Laha in Al-Huli and Al-Rastan, in addition to another gathering in Hama countryside, inflicting heavy casualties among them. In Al-Qamishli, terrorists detonated an explosive device planted near Al-Qadisiyya school in Al-Wahda street, injuring 3 citizens and inflicting material damage in the area. The injured were carried to the National Hospital for treatment. In Jdeid al-Shaybani of Damascus countryside, Syrian Arab Army units seized a van loaded with weapons, including an automatic guns, 2 sniper rifles and a machine gun hidden in a cache on the shape of a fuel tank. The car was coming from Al-Hasaka and heading to the market of Wadi Balada. Dozens of Syrians staged a sit-in in front of the Turkish Embassy in Damascus in a show of solidarity with the Turkish people rejecting Erdogan's crackdown on Turkish demonstrators. The rallied also held Erdogan's government as responsible for turning the Turkish-Syrian borders into an a hotbed for terrorists that come from different parts of the world, providing them with weapons and facilitating their movement to carry out acts of terrorism inside Syria. Turkish media said that Turkish police raided a number of houses in several cities today. Turkish police arrested dozens after the anti-government protest going on for 3 weeks now. The RT channel said 25 people were arrested in Ankara, 13 in Izmir, and many others were arrested in Istanbul. More details on our website www.syriaonline.sy. Stay with us. Our economic news is after the break.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. The manager of the automatic bakeries said that the aim of the measures taken by the company is to increase the productive energy in the branches, while the main goal is to ensure stability in the availability of bread on the one hand and provide products according to the needed qualities on the other hand. He added that the company has adopted the routine maintenance policy and some new mechanisms in order to increase the production and meet the market's needs of bread. The real estate bank demanded the Ministry of Finance to continue granting the loans to the subscribers according to the savings scheme. So the general establishment of housing could deliver the allocated houses to the subscribers. On the other hand, the establishment expressed its readiness to cooperate with the real estate bank to find a legal and financial solution for both sides through a long-term deposit which guarantees granting the necessary loans to the subscribers in accordance to the specified laws. The American crude oil traded near the highest price in more than 4 months, before a government report showing that the U.S. stockpiles declined as refinery processing increased. Futures were little changed after slipping 8 cents yesterday from the highest settlement since January. European shares fell as investors awaited the U.S. housing data to gauge whether the Federal Reserve will signal stimulus cuts at its policy meeting that will start today. The U.S. index futures were little changed, whereas the Asian shares swung between gains and losses as the Federal Reserve prepares for a 2-day policy meeting. The Jewelers Assembly set the price of the 21-carat gold at 7,400 Syrian pounds per gram, raising 500 from yesterday, while the Rashadi golden coin was set at 53,700 Syrian pounds, and the English golden coin was set at 60,000 Syrian pounds. The yen weakened for a second day against the US dollar as the yen also dropped against most of its major peers after a Bank of Japan report showed that the current account balance may rise to a record amid unprecedented monetary stimulus, while the euro retreated against the US dollar after the European Central Bank president said that the policymakers are considering further non-standard monetary policy tools and will deploy them if the circumstances warrant. Ladies and gentlemen, this was our economic news for today. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.